Zionism is the highest form of white supremacy, when you can colonize their land, take all of their resources, eradicate the indigenous people, and then turn around and have the audacity to cloak yourself in their identity while simultaneously invoking God's name and saying that He wants this for your people after you just committed an ethnic cleansing. That is the highest form of white supremacy.
Reminder that Zionism is dangerous to Jews, anti-Semitic, and caused the Holocaust, since I haven't said it in a couple months. Yes, Zionism did in fact come before the Holocaust. It came 20 years before the Holocaust. And the reason the Holocaust happened in the first place is because the spread of fascism, the popularization and normalization of fascism around the world globally. Zionists betrayed Jews just like they were going to betray the other oppressed groups that they tried to sell homeland movements to. Same reason Malcolm X left Nation of Islam, because Nation of Islam kept taking meetings and working with white supremacist groups like the one that is the 3Ks. At least 1 in 25 people are sociopaths, based on modest expert estimates. Their top 4 preferred positions are as CEOs, lawyers, doctors, and teachers. Of course, we haven't studied subgroups like cops and government officials as often as we have studied other subgroups. Because usually sociopaths are only studied because they commit a crime and they are caught for that crime and then forced to go to counseling. And we don't really try cops and government officials for crime. So who knows what the rates of sociopathy are among those two? Okay, but I have a hypothesis as a sociological researcher and a government-trained victim advocate, and my hypotheses are usually right. The social scientists of the world are going to have a field day with the onslaught of case studies that will be suddenly at our fingertips when humanity puts the Geneva Convention to shame by trying not only IDF soldiers and Israeli officials, but also American officials on a level that we have never tried war criminals before. So it is. From the river to the sea, land back everywhere.
So these videos bring together several Jewish individuals who explain why they no longer support Zionism and how their views changed over time. They talked about growing up believing one version of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but after learning more about Palestinian history, they began to question what they had always been taught. And throughout the video, they discussed identity, history, fear, and their belief that equal rights and peaceful coexistence should be the goal for everyone in the region. As always, this is a reaction to the ideas presented in the video, and I encourage everyone to approach the discussion with respect. So guys, let us continue watching the videos, and please remember to subscribe to the channel.
My name is Joseph Avasar. I am Jewish. I was born in Israel and I was raised there, but I am not a Zionist. Zionism is a philosophy of fear. It taught the Jewish people to be afraid and to run away from Europe because they were afraid of anti-Semites instead of demanding equality. It taught the Jewish people, once they moved to Palestine, to be dismissive and to be afraid of the Palestinians instead of demanding and requesting equality with the Palestinians. It taught the Jewish people to expel 750,000 Palestinians instead of learning to live with them forever in peace. It is now responsible for the occupation and for the apartheid system. It is still a culture of fear. Zionism teaches the Jews to be afraid of Palestinians, of Muslims, and of anti-Semites. It's time to stop this nonsense. I am proposing to end the occupation, to end the fear, and to create a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine based on true democratic principles, based on equality, and based on respect. Thank you.
I'm kind of starting to have the same reaction to like the Star of David as like the swastika, right? Like they took the swastika, which was originally a Hindu symbol, religious symbol, and because of its association with Nazi Germany, now when you see it, you don't think of Hinduism, you think of Nazis. And the same, it's like I know consciously like the Star of David is just a religious symbol for the Jewish community, right? And Jewish people as like, you know, individuals don't necessarily all support or have something to do with Israel or Zionism, but it's association by Israelis and the IDF to their genocidal occupation and them carving it in people's foreheads and putting it in people's fucking houses that they bulldozered or bombed. It's like now when I see it, I have like an instinctual like reaction, like it's a swastika, you know what I mean? And it's like, damn, like Israel, like Zionists have done irreparable damage conflating the Jewish identity with Zionism. Oh my goodness.
This is a call-in to all Jews who support Palestine, all Jews who are concerned about what is happening in Gaza. Whether you are Jewish and in the diaspora or Jewish and living in Israel, I want to hear your perspectives on this. When did you realize that the Zionist mythology of Israel was a lie? When did you start to ask yourself the question of what about Palestine? What was the moment? What was the experience? What was the educational material? What happened that got you to start questioning the mythology that you had been taught about Israel being our land? Our Muslim brothers and sisters, not only in Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank, but all across the world are suffering. They are heartbroken. They are watching a genocide happen in Palestine and watching Jewish people and white people, really the world over, turn their backs and ignore it and pretend that that's not what it is. And we need to show them that we have their backs, that we're going to speak loudly, that we are in the process of unlearning, that we are in the process of figuring out how to ally up for them. So, please post your unlearning moment. What happened? When did you start to interrogate the messages that you had received as children or from your faith community, so that we can provide them some counterexamples and show how much we care?
Is it just me, or the more people talk about this, the more it's helping people learn the truth and unlearn certain things or lies they were taught? Seeing others responding and just sharing those moments just shows how many people are really coming to the realization. A lot of people share their experiences, and I would advise that you stay glued as I share some of the stitches with you, and make sure to watch the video to the very end, because I will be sharing more experiences from the comments. Here are the stitches.
Of what about Palestine?
Too freaking late. I started asking myself that question too freaking late. I grew up culturally Jewish. My friends, my boyfriends, my life was surrounded by Jewish people. In fact, it was like kind of cool to be Jewish when I grew up. I didn't even really know the concept of Zionism, because Zionism was just Judaism, right? The idea that Israel should be a place, a safe haven for Jewish people. That just was what it was. The concept of birthright made total sense. I didn't even question it. The fact that the government would subsidize a trip to Israel so that you could see your homeland, that didn't strike me as weird at all. And the Jewish population is pretty small, so there's only a few degrees of separation between you and somebody who lives in Israel. And it just felt like part of the package of being Jewish. I didn't question the fact that after the Holocaust, we would need a safe haven. And yes, 6 million people dying this close in terms of the history of the world is terrifying. And yes, Jewish people are not the most beloved people on the planet, right? Traditionally, we're not. So yeah, it made sense to me. But I didn't think about how many other people have been genocided and that they don't get their own theocratic ethno-state. I didn't know that in order to achieve that, in order to get Israel to be Israel, that Palestinians had to be forcibly removed from their homes. I didn't know that it was an illegal occupation. I didn't know that Israel controlled a huge percentage of Palestinians' water. I didn't know that it was a 75-year occupation. I didn't know that Palestinians had to move through checkpoints in order to get anywhere. I didn't know that 90% of their economy is from handouts that like the world has been giving them resources because they don't have any of their own because of said occupation. I didn't know that there were thousands of Palestinian prisoners in Israel that don't get a trial, hundreds of whom are kids. I didn't know that Israel had one of the strongest militaries in the world and provides military supplies to a lot of the rest of the world. I didn't think about the fact that putting an ally in the middle of the Middle East filled with Jews as a gift from the US and from the British would be a super smart political tactic because none of the rest of the world wanted us anywhere. My first thought after the October 7th attack was what a brutal, horrific thing to happen to the Jewish population and to the Israeli civilians. And I still believe that that is true. However, I didn't have context. And now that over 10,000 Palestinians have died. Now that I know that Israel dropped more bombs in 6 days than the US dropped in Afghanistan in an entire year of war. Now that I've listened and learned for the past 3 weeks, I wish I had asked, what about Palestine sooner?
When I saw that film, I had already started questioning a lot about Zionism, but I was like 14, 15 years old, so I was really alone in this journey of unlearning. I had the incredible privilege of making friends with 2 Palestinians online on Tumblr, and they taught me so much, and I'm really, really grateful for them. But even with like those first few months, I was still like really, really trying to convince myself, like, no, like there has to be something good. Like there really does, like there has to be something. And then I saw this film, and it changed my brain chemistry. There were a lot of things in that film that I didn't know was happening. I think that the most shocking thing to me was the midnight raids where the IOF would kidnap children in the middle of the night. There's a lot in that film, and I don't want to spoil. And it is a documentary about a man basically just documenting the birth of his new son and his life as he's growing, and just showing what life is like in the West Bank. I haven't seen it in a long time. I haven't seen it in a few years, not even just a few, but I've seen it twice, and I think the last time I saw it was in 2013, and I haven't been able to watch it again since. And it really did something to me. So I really recommend that everybody watch this. I don't care if you happened upon my video, you're anti-Zionist or you're Zionist. Watch 5 Broken Cameras. Watch 5 Broken Cameras. Please. Please.
All Jews who are...
So mine was, there was a lot of little things and a lot of tiny things that made me see, that I think let me see that maybe everything wasn't just as I thought it was. And I think that paved the way for this big moment, because like I think the little things kind of like picked at the foundation. Let's say like my Zionism was like a house, right? I think all these little things were like picking and like at the foundation of the house and like decreasing its stability, like people talking about Palestine, people talking about the history and making me question and second guess what I had been taught. That was picking away at the foundations, right? And forcing me to look more into things. And so that was picking away at the foundations. And then this article that I read, I think my freshman year of college, was, I think, anthropology. And it was like an archaeological article. Right. Try saying that 5 times fast. It was about how the Israeli government spends a lot of time and money trying to, specifically around the old Jerusalem, so like the old city, trying to actively displace Palestinians. And it talked about like how the justice system was working against them and stuff like that, which I had never heard of before. They were actively trying to displace them, kick them out of their homes so they could expand like the temple complex and build an archaeological park around it. And just reading that, like, I love history. I love a good archaeological park, but I could not fathom kicking people out of their homes to do it. Like, to me, those two things are not compatible. Like, I love archaeology, and I would never do that. Like, it's not that important to me, right? It's cool, but it's never that important to kick somebody out of their house, bulldoze their house, or force them to evict with nowhere to go, in favor of like an archaeological park. And I love history. I love archaeology. But I was like, it's...
So as an American Jew, I feel like I've had a lot of brushes with Zionism and just like sort of narrowly avoided each one. It started when I was in Hebrew school. This is about third grade, and we get a teacher who is from Israel, has recently moved to the area. And in fourth grade, I had his wife. Both of them, obviously, since they just come from Israel, talked all about Israel. And I found this like incredibly irrelevant to me. I had only gone to Hebrew school because my mom told me I could get my ears pierced when I had a bat mitzvah. So I was really only there for that. And my connection to Judaism came really from what I knew of my family's history, which was in Eastern Europe, Hungary, Lithuania, Romania, Ukraine, places like that. And then in New York, where we first emigrated to. So Israel just like did not seem relevant to me at all. And I hated sitting through Hebrew school classes on it that I just did not care about. Also, a big part of why I never fell for this propaganda is my parents, and I should give them credit where credit is due. Because when my dad heard that we were studying Israel and learning all this touristy Israel stuff and how great it was there and how we should all go there on birthright one day and then join the IDF and make Aliyah, he was like, you are not going to Israel. It's dangerous there. There's a conflict there. And I had vaguely heard of Israel-Palestine's relations like on the news. So all I knew about Israel outside of Hebrew school was that it's a dangerous place to go. And then all I was hearing in Hebrew school was that it's like the best place ever and so necessary for Jews. And like we did all these projects on the founders of Israel. In fact, the only reason I did not fail out of and have to repeat 5th grade of Hebrew school was because I pulled a project on Golda Meir out of my ass. I had to do that, or I would have been stuck in Hebrew school an extra year, which, believe me, I did not want to do. So I go through Hebrew school this whole time just kind of having a bad feeling about Israel and just not really getting why it was supposed to be important to me. And throughout Hebrew school, they're showing you a lot of like Holocaust imagery that's really disturbing, so you understand why Israel is needed. And it is pretty baked into Judaism. Like in the Passover Seder, the last thing you say is next year in Jerusalem. Like we're hoping to go back. But my family, to their credit, never says next year in Jerusalem because we don't have any connection to Israel. And basically, everyone in my family thinks that Israel was a bad choice for a place to do a Jewish state. And our attitude toward it, which comes from this joke my grandfather once made, is like, why did they have to put the Jewish state somewhere people already were living? Why couldn't they just have picked like an unpopulated corner of Wyoming instead, where hardly anyone lives anyway? So every year, instead of next year in Jerusalem at the Passover Seder, we say next year in Wyoming. All that to say, the Holocaust imagery was terrible, but it didn't really move me, and I distinctly remember the first time I heard about another recent genocide in middle school, which was the Great Purge. And I was like, that's so crazy that we don't learn about any other genocides. And I learned about the Rwandan genocide, and I was like, what? Why did I only ever hear about the Holocaust? Not just in Hebrew school, but also in elementary school. But anyway, the thing that really first made me ask what about Palestine was when I read this book, Habibi, in 8th grade. I don't know if you know this book, but it is just one of my most formative books that I've ever read in my entire life. It's about a Palestinian American family who moves to Israel, and the young daughter falls in love with a Jewish boy. It's written by a Palestinian author, and it was the first time I had ever heard any kind of Palestinian perspective on Israel. And that was the first time I ever felt like, you know what, it would be really cool to go to Israel for a visit just to see it. And I knew the only way I was going to be able to afford that was to go on Birthright. But I also knew that going on Birthright, there would be even more pro-Israel propaganda shoved down my throat. Nevertheless, I vaguely planned to go on Birthright, but I kept putting it off, largely because of an experience I had my freshman year of college. So because there was no other Jewish life on my campus, I started going to the Chabad house, and they had this class they were running that paid you $350 to take it for 10 weeks, learning about each of the 10 commandments through like their perspective. The class itself was not the issue, but two things things happened at Chabad that really made me realize that I did not even want to align myself with like mainstream Judaism at all. The first one was the attitude towards marriage. And I knew like from the Broad City episode and jokes about finding a nice Jewish boy that like that was an important thing to Jewish people, but I did not know it was to this level. I remember specifically once the rabbi said that it was so important to find your bashert, your Jewish soulmate, that you might have to go all the way to Israel to do that, and that's okay. Which really underscores everything the creator I stitched has been saying about birthright. I had never encountered Jews before who were like anti-intermarriage, like they really want you to marry somebody who is ethnically Jewish and then have them become more religious. And yes, people can convert, but really the focus on ethnic Judaism made me feel like it was a bit of a keep the bloodlines pure kind of thing. This just had echoes of white supremacy to me, and I would yell that far and wide because I was so upset about it. I just never encountered that attitude before. And there was this one guy in the course who particularly loved to rail against intermarriage and how he couldn't get his brother to date Jewish girls. And one day he started talking about how much he supported Trump for his stance on Israel. And keep in mind, this is early 2016 before the election, so the stakes are pretty damn high. He also said he thinks Bernie Sanders is a traitor to the Jewish people for his stance on Palestine, and that in particular really revved me up. And listen, I am from Burlington, Vermont, okay? Bernie Sanders is basically our head of state. We love him, and we don't just love him for his politics, although I agree with almost all of his politics. We love him because he's a really good person, and a lot of us have had personal encounters with him and know him, and he's just like a good guy. Bernie also is originally from Brooklyn, like my family, and came to Burlington, Vermont, like my family. And he was the only Jew I'd ever heard of not unequivocally supporting Israel at the time. So when this guy says that, I was like, I am out of here. I had never met a conservative Jew before. Other than the Zionism, I came from a very progressive synagogue, and I was shocked and horrified because I could see that Trump was aligning himself with neo-Nazism and white supremacy and people who wanted to eliminate all Jews. So this was my other brush with Zionism, and it's kind of a miracle I didn't fall for it. I also almost went on birthright, but then I kept putting it off because of COVID, and I kept putting it off because I wanted someone to go with me because I didn't want to buy into all the propaganda. And then finally, in my final year of eligibility this year, I'm 26 right now, it was full, so I couldn't go. And now I probably never will see Israel, and that's okay with me because I really only ever wanted to go as a tourist. And I feel kind of lucky about that because I've come so close to being indoctrinated so many times. And maybe it was my upbringing and my parents' views on Israel, or maybe it was just me seeing the contradictions and how it was talked about, but I just never quite fell for it because I could see that supporting Israel also meant supporting a lot of things that I don't support. For example, Donald Trump and genocide. So that's my story of how I made it through Zionist spaces without ever quite buying in.
Was a lie.
Cult, you have no idea that you're in a cult. Just like me. I had no idea that I was in a cult. I used to be a part of the cult of Zionism, and I had no idea. I also had no idea what Palestine was. I'm a Messianic Jew, so I was raised similarly to how most evangelical Christian families would raise their kids. Growing up, I was told that Israel was the best place on earth. My grandparents lived there, so did my mother. They told me one day we would all move back. My grandmother's dog is named Bibi, after Netanyahu. There are many Zionists who don't know they're Zionists. There are many Zionists who genuinely believe that Israel is not targeting hospitals, that they're not targeting civilians, that they're not unaliving children. There are Zionists that genuinely believe, because they're choosing to, that the death toll is fake. They genuinely don't believe that this many children have been murdered. 8,000 children, by the way. Netanyahu is a fascist dictator, and his whole far-right coalition are evil incarnate. Zionism hides behind the Jewish identity. It puts Jews in danger. It uses Jews as human shields because it relies on your ignorance to survive. Zionism is anti-Semitism. Zionism is not just a danger to Palestinians and Jews, it is a danger to the...
Okay, welcome back. The first thing that stood out to me is how personal these stories are. These aren't people talking only about politics. They are talking about family, culture, religion, and beliefs they grew up with. Whether someone agrees with their conclusion or not, it's clear that changing long-held beliefs was not an easy process for them. It reminds us that people often arrive at their opinions through personal experiences as much as facts and history. Many of the speakers say they were raised to see Zionism as a central part of Jewish identity. As they got older, they began reading different books, watching documentaries, speaking with Palestinians, and learning about historical events from perspectives they hadn't previously considered. They explained that this led them to rethink the story they had always been taught. A major topic in the video is the displacement of many Palestinians during the 1948 war, commonly referred by Palestinians as the Nakba. The speakers argue that understanding this history is important for understanding today's conflict. At the same time, it's worth remembering that the history surrounding 1948 is interpreted differently by different historians and communities, which is one of the conflict remains so deeply contested. Another point raised is the role of fear. Several participants say they grew up fearing Palestinians, Muslims, and anti-Semitism, and they believe those fears influenced how they viewed the conflict. Their argument is that lasting peace requires moving beyond fear while still recognizing legitimate security concerns. They believe equality, justice, and mutual respect offer a better path forward. The video also discusses on education and media. Some contributors mentioned that documentaries, books, and conversations with people on the ground changed their misunderstanding of life in the West Bank. They say that hearing voices they hadn't heard before helped them see the conflict from other perspectives. Then the discussion shifts towards history itself. It explained that people often disagree over who has historical ties to the land, what happened during the creation of the State of Israel, and how those events should be understood today. These questions are at the center of one of the world's longest running and most emotionally changed conflicts. And I think it's important to recognize that there are many perspectives on these issues. Many Israelis, Palestinians, historians, legal scholars, and human rights organizations disagree on key aspects of the conflict. That is why it's valuable to read widely, examine evidence carefully, and avoid assuming that any single video or source tells the whole story. And one thing I appreciated about this video is that it encourages people to think critically. Whether you agree with the speaker or disagree with them, listening to different viewpoints can help you better understand why people hold the beliefs they do. Understanding other perspectives isn't the same as accepting every argument. It simply means being willing to learn. At the same time, it is impossible to ignore that this conflict has caused immense suffering for both Palestinians and Israelis. Families on both sides have experienced loss, fear, displacement, and trauma over many decades. Discussion about the conflict should keep that human's reality at the center instead of reducing everything to politics or ideology. For me, the biggest takeaway is that history is really simple. Different communities remember the same events differently, and people often interpret evidence through different historical, political, or cultural lenses. That is why independent research and respectful discussions are so important. Overall, this was a thoughtful, provoking video. It presents the personal journeys of Jewish individuals who came to question Zionism while encouraging viewers to explore history from multiple perspectives. Whether you agree with the speakers or not, the video challenges people to think critically instead of accepting a single narrative without question. Thank you for watching this reaction, and if you have thoughts on what was discussed, share them respectively in the comments. I love to hear different perspectives as long as we keep the conversation civil and focused on understanding rather than attacking one another. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. please remember to subscribe to the channel.